Okay, completing the square is about making an equation be able to factor, and you control how it factors. Okay, so here we're going to look at part A of this one. We're going to go x squared minus 4x. Then we're going to put a blank. We want to put something in that blank. We've done this already, but we're practicing again. We did it the last few days. Now the 7, we could leave the 7 here. I'm actually going to move the 7, so I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So on this side, I now have a positive 7. If I move that negative 7 over to the other side, I have that. And then I'm going to put a blank behind that. We're going to fill in both those blanks. Let's remember rules of equations. You have to do the same thing to both sides. Now, how do I come up with, what do I fill the blank in with? And this is why you have your calculator. And in your calculator, you look at the B term. You take the negative 4 and you divide by 2. So on your calculator, write negative 4 divided by 2. And what you're going to have on your screen, now my calculator's coming up, but I'm just going to do it here. I would have negative 2. Now that's going to be part of the problem. We're going to need that negative 2, but that's not what we put in the blank. Next, you hit the little squared button on your calculator. And what do you see? Not negative 4. You should have positive 4. Okay? So, because negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. So if you remember the process is the same every time. You take that negative 4, divide by 2. Hit enter, and then hit this squared button. And if you hit that squared button, it makes it positive 4. That's what goes in the blank. Okay? So we put in the blank, everyone, plus 4, plus 4. Now, that negative 2 that was first on your calculator screen is how this is going to factor. Underneath here, we're going to write x minus 2. Now, don't write this. Just watch for a moment. It would be x minus 2 times x minus 2. And the reason I say don't write it is because I want you to get to the point where you don't have to use this step. But if you look at it, x times x is x squared. Negative 2x and negative 2x make negative 4x, and negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. So we controlled how this thing factored. But there's another way we can take this. That x minus 2 is the same factor, so we don't write it. We'll just move it and erase it, get it out of the way. We can write it like that. And because you're making it do what you want, we can just jump right to that step. Now, on the other side, we can put these together. 7 plus 4 is 11. Now it is to a place where we can solve the equation by taking a square root. So we take the square root of each side. So on your calculator, the square root button, you have to press Control, and then you press this, and you put in that 11, and we find out what it is. Now, some people automatically, they're like, oh, it's 5.5. No, that's half of 5. Okay, we don't want, or half of 11. 5.5 is half. We don't want half. We want what number times itself is 11. And there's not an easy one. And if you're like, why is it 3 point something? I'm going to show you something because, see, 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16. So to get 11, 11's got to be somewhere in between 3 and 4. And what this says is it's 3.3. So does that make a little bit of sense why it's 3.3? 3.3 times 3.3 gets us about 11. Now, the more decimals you keep, the more accurate it is. But we're just going to use the 3.3. So x minus 2 equals 3.3. But it also could be negative 3.3. Because a negative times a negative would be a positive 11. So we write 2 equations, and now we solve them. We say, well, I'm going to add 2, and x could be 5.3. I'm going to add 2 here, and x could be negative 1.3. And we talked about that. Remember, it's like a temperature on a thermometer. If we're at negative 5 degrees, and we come up 2, we're now at negative 1. But those are our two answers. Now, generally, you're going to have two answers. Sometimes you have one. Sometimes you have none. It depends. Like square roots of negative numbers end up giving us no answers. Okay? All right. So now let's look at part B. But this is about completing the square. Everybody good with part A? Because I'm going to erase this one. All good? All right. So part B. Let's take this x squared. I'm going to move down a little bit. That part of the board is always kind of wrinkly. So x squared plus 10x, we're going to put in a blank, equals. Now I'm going to subtract 37 from each side. So over here I get negative 35. And then another blank. We have to figure out what goes in the blank. So see if you can come up with a number. We've done it enough now. You deal with this number and do the process. It's a two-step process to figure out what comes in the blank. Everybody got about 10 seconds to see if you can figure it out. Use your calculator. What do you think goes in the blank? 25 is correct. Did everybody get 25? So you take the 10, you divide by 2, and that gets you 5, and then you hit the squared button, it gets you 25. Now, to factor this, that 5 that's on your calculator screen is important. Again, I'm going to show it on the calculator screen, so anybody who watches this later or at home, you take the 10, divide by 2, 5, then you hit the squared button, 25. That's how we get it. Now, both the 5 and the 25 are helpful in this problem. That's a positive 5. It's a positive 25. The reason the 5 is helpful, that's what goes in here. Because 5 times 5 is 25. 5 plus 5 is the 10. Equals negative 10. Now, where did I get the negative 10? I put these two together. Does that make sense? Take the square root, and you would have x plus 5 equals, and take the square root of negative 10 in your calculator, and your calculator says something kind of crazy. What does it say? No real calculation. So this one has no solution because there's no real numbers. You know, we've talked about all real numbers before. That thing that we always put on a lot of them, like the domain and things like that, means any number you think of can work. But no real number means there is no number that you can multiply by itself to get a negative. Okay? Next one. 2x squared. I am going to add 2x to each side. Why am I going to do that? I want to get all the x's over here, so I have plus 16x. Yep, because I add the 2x to the 14x, I get 16x. You see it? Equals 20. Now, I haven't put the blank in yet. The reason I haven't put the blank in, there is something that I want to put the blank in, but what I don't like about this problem is there's a 2 there. So I want to get rid of the 2. There's a couple ways I can get rid of the 2. One is by what we call factoring. So we can factor it. I can bring out the 2, and I get x squared plus, 8x. Now I'll put in the blank. So I pulled the 2 out. I divided both those by 2. If I were to multiply that 2 back in, I would get back to 2x squared plus 16x, right? So now what number goes in the blank? 16 is correct. because you take the 8, divide by 2 in your calculator, get 4, then you hit squared on the calculator, gives you 16. But the problem is the other side is not going to be 16. It's not going to be negative 16. The other side is going to be plus 32. Now, why is that plus 32? Because this 2, when I put this 16 in, if I took this 2 and multiplied, I'd have 2x squared plus 16x. And then the 2, since that blank went in there, I'd have to multiply the 2. I really added 32 when I did that. Does that make some sense? Okay, so now we're going to factor. 2. X plus what squared? What's that? What did we manipulate it to? It's x plus what squared? Should be on the page here somewhere. 4. Okay? Equals 52. I will now divide both sides by 2. Get x plus 4 squared equals 26. Take the square root. Square root of 26 in your calculator, 5.1. What is it, 5.1? 5.0. So if we round it up, is it 5.1? 5.09. Okay, so we're going to call it 5.1. And x plus 4 equals negative 5.1. Now we will subtract 4. 5.1 minus 4 is 1.1. Negative 5.1 minus 4 is negative what? Careful. 9.1. Okay. All right, next one. Might need your help because it's kind of cut off page for me. All right, so first I'm going to add 50x to each side. I get negative 5x squared plus 50x minus 20 equals 0. Okay? This one's going to take a few steps. It's kind of like the last one. I'm going to factor out a negative 5. Factoring out a negative 5 is kind of tricky. The negative 5 comes out. I would have negative 5x squared. This becomes negative 10 because a negative times a negative is a positive 50. I am going to move the 20 to the other side by adding 20. You don't have to show that, but sometimes it's helpful. I'm going to put a blank in here. Okay. Now I have to figure out what goes in the blank. Now, this is plus 25. This is not plus 25. Almost put it there. You have to take the negative 5 times the 25, figure out what that is, and do the same thing. What's negative 5 times 25? Negative 125 is what goes over here. Okay? All right. Now this one's going to look like there's no solution. I'm going to warn you ahead of time. It's going to look like it, but there is a solution. So we now have negative 5 times x minus 5 squared by x minus 5. When you took the negative 10 in your calculator divided by 2, you got a negative 5. That's how we made it factor. Over here, we get negative 105. Now, right away, you say, see, we're going to take the square root of a negative, but we're not. Because we're going to divide by negative 5 here. And when we divide by negative 5, we get 21. Now we can take the square root of 21, and that's 4 point something. Four point what? 4.8? 4.58? Okay, so we'll call it 4.6. Okay? So x minus 5 equals 4.6. X minus 5 equals negative 4.6. We add 5. We get 9.6. We add 5. We get